Right now, we go to our good friend Chris Woodward, who will be anchoring on American Family News, onenewsnow.com, tonight's coverage of the State of the Union. Hello, Chris.
How are you?
I am doing well. I'm excited. Nerd alert. I mean, aren't we all?
I'm ready for the truth.
Well, first off, we're glad to have you back, healthy.
Yes.
That's awesome, man. And you better be healthy because you're going to be working late tonight.
Yes, it is the event that everyone is talking about, at least in Washington, and we're not talking about the Seahawks' chances of beating the Denver Broncos.
And that, of course, is the State of the Union address. Now, I just heard you mention there are going to be a number of responses. Now, what exactly are you all going to be covering tonight?
Right. Well, we'll be watching the president's remarks, pulling some sound bites from that to tell you kind of give you an idea of what he said. And the Republican responses, actually, there are two Republicans responding. You've got Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who's going to be speaking on behalf of the Tea Party. Rand Paul did that last year. And then on the Republican Party side, specifically for the Republican Party, you've got Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rogers of Washington State.
All right. Now, when we look at these, do you think that we will see that we have a Republican Party that's been described as having a civil war within it?
Right. Yeah, we saw that some last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
And will you see that back and forth potentially not only between the State of the Union, contrasting the State of the Union to the response, but also contrasting the Republican parties versus the Tea Party's response?
Mm-hmm. I definitely think we will see that again, and you might even see some Democrats use that as campaign material. Certainly in a year when these parties are going to be vying for your votes, that is something I would suspect one party to use against the other. Last year we had Senator Rand Paul give the Tea Party response, and then you had Senator Marco Rubio and the very talked about water bottle response for the Republican Party. Both of those guys were helped put into office through the Tea Party, so even that was used to show that, hey, maybe the Tea Party is divided on these two people.
Very interesting that you would point out that was the big story regarding the mainstream media's coverage of Marco Rubio when it comes to his response, which many of us, as a commentator, absolutely absurd. I didn't understand. I rarely do. That said, what do you think? Have excerpts been released? I know oftentimes they give a little preview. We're going to be hearing about opportunity versus inequality tonight from the president.
Right. A number of there have been some excerpts, some hints, if you will, on what he's going to talk about. Certainly the push for a higher minimum wage. We've already seen some talk of executive orders to raise the federal minimum wage for federal contractors from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour, although, as you heard at the top of the hour there, former presidential candidate, a man that Barack Obama beat in 2012, Mitt Romney told Fox News today that he really couldn't think of anybody working for the federal government making $7.25 an hour. So definitely it'll just push their pay higher if the president gets his way. We will probably hear a lot about extending unemployment benefits or resuming unemployment benefits for people that saw their benefits expire at the end of 2013. As we mentioned in that previous newscast there, someone from Illinois who had their benefits expire is going to be sitting with the First Lady tonight. And as we have mentioned, generally people that sit with the First Lady are kind of there for the cameras to turn to when a president is talking about something he wants done. We'll probably hear a good bit about education. Certainly Common Core is an education plan that not a lot of center-right organizations are fans of, so we can expect to see a lot of rebuttals to that in the days coming later this week, as well as immigration reform. That is something that even the Republican Party is in favor of, although Congressman Ryan did say recently that they're looking at taking it up in pieces, and whether or not they're really going to do that in an election year with a whole host of 501c4 organizations that are not exactly fans of the current plan from the Senate, we'll see a lot of people talk about that as well.
All right. Now, I just have two more questions. The first question, beat the press this Saturday, or this Friday, pardon me?
Yeah, I can be here Saturday, too, if you want. Yeah, that's no problem.
I'll call you.
I'll have my kids with me, but
that's how it'll work. But I also wanted to know, who would you invite, if you're president of the United States, who would you put in your box?
Oh, that's a tough one. First of all, I could never be president. Not that I'm.
Where are you from?
Well, I'm from. I was born in Mississippi.
I'm kidding.
I was born in Mississippi. But I'm too honest. I don't know that I would get voted into office.
You are remarkably honest, and we appreciate that about you. Great coverage tonight. OneNewsNow.com, OneNewsNow.com, American Family News. That's why I always tell you to lock it in. The great Chris Woodward, business and environment reporter for American Family News, OneNewsNow.com, anchoring the coverage tonight. This is why you lock it in. Chris, great to be with you. I know you've got to get back to work, and we got to get back to the show, but it's always a privilege and a pleasure. And
that's right. And, television coverage tonight is overblown. Stick with radio. It's the thing of the future. It's better than television.
Yes. Well, you're judging it on the substance and not the smoke and mirrors,
it's
right?
It's theater of the mind. Yes.
That's right. But we don't mind the people watching right now, of course.
Yes, thank you.
They could be looking in. Okay. Great to be with you, my friend.
All right, man.
Take care.
See you later.
See you Friday. Take care. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. We continue. Ed Henry, speaking of the power of the pen, Ed Henry asked Jay Carney, hey, you're talking about infrastructure jobs, Jay Carney, White House press secretary. Why not just sign the Keystone pipeline into existence and get those construction jobs and more oil? It's a win-win. Jay Carney, not so much. Roll it.
Ed, as you know, as has been the practice for many years now of administrations of both parties, the reviews involved in an international pipeline like this, a pipeline that crosses an international boundary, are done or run by the State Department, and that process continues at the State Department.
Would be involved in this decision. The State Department handles it, but they've had it on their desk for what, 2 years?
Well, what the President is doing is what his predecessors did, of both parties, which is allowing the State Department to oversee a process where this pipeline is evaluated. And when that process is done, I'm sure we'll be made aware of it. But what the President believes is that it's important to maintain a process that was devised, again, and utilized by White Houses of both parties in order to ensure that the right decision is made.
Now, they've done the environmental studies, and even President Obama's own review has said, well, it's okay. The reason they're not going forward with this, I'll have to look beyond what was just said, and I'm not saying they weren't telling the truth because, I would just declare that. I am saying that President Obama is not interested in the pipeline. He's not interested in oil. And you say, well, we're producing more than we ever have, but we've cut back on drilling and permits for natural gas and oil on lands that are federally controlled, federal lands. So the increase has come despite President Obama's practices when it comes to energy. But again, politics trumps agenda, or politics is the agenda, because if you really wanted to fix the problem, if you're interested in infrastructure jobs, you could have 49,000. And the response, interestingly enough, is those are temporary jobs, as any construction job is temporary. But this would be 49,000 jobs that would allow people to work right now. Now, after it's built, yeah, I think only 49 jobs are the main. But it's just interesting to me how they position these things. It's, 42,000 over 2 years. 42,000, not 49,000. So 7,000 off. Bottom line, politics and the true agenda. If you want to fix something, well, ideologically, I guess ideology trumps fixing a problem or addressing a problem or doing what's right for the country. But arguably, they could say, hey, you know what? Ideologically, I look at this and say, inevitably this will be bad because it'll create more greenhouse gases. But if you don't put it in a pipeline, you go by rail, you create even more greenhouse gases. Not that I buy the connection and the causation, certainly, between the increasing amount of greenhouse gases and temperature, because we saw that flat line, and that's why the hockey stick graph of Al Gore didn't really go that far. Or it did, and then it was exposed for what it was. That all said, interesting question from Ed Henry. Now we go to the minimum wage. And this is interesting because Bill Gates recently on MSNBC defended not raising the minimum wage. And he, in essence, said that's going to lead to more automation and less jobs. And then he went with the people who actually earn the minimum wage. Well, responding to that was National Employment Law Project spokesperson. She said this in response to Bill Gates. Remember, Bill Gates has created a lot of jobs, understands business, yet not really that informed when it comes to the minimum wage and how business really works. Roll it.
Well, with all due respect to Bill Gates, the weight of the economic evidence is against him. Just this week, 600 economists released a letter supporting raising the federal minimum wage, and that's because his argument about jobs fleeing across jurisdictions, these fast food workers, these fast food joints are not going to leave. They are servicing local economies. And these are adults working these jobs. 88% of workers who make less than $10 an hour are adults. Many of them are spending their careers in these jobs because we have essentially become a low-wage economy where more and more jobs that are being created are jobs that pay less than $10 an hour. So, I think he's a little bit out of touch about the realities of the modern-day low-wage workforce and what it would mean for these workers, for local businesses that rely on their consumer spending to stay afloat, for families that rely on them so that they don't have to turn to public assistance to make ends meet. I think he's a little out of touch on that.
Well, the evidence is clear that we have people who are earning this are about 3% of the workforce. Over half of them, 61%, come from are part of families earning 53 grand a year, and 2/3 of minimum wage workers receive a raise in the first year. And it's about 11% of the people, 4 or 11, I don't want to overdo it, but it's so small, the group that actually are heads of households that solely rely on the minimum wage. And so they're addressing this problem, and they're exploiting our concern for those in need and our desire for us to help others. I'm against the minimum wage for the simple purpose that I don't believe the government has the right, the federal government, to come in and tell me how much I should pay the person who works for me. Now, the law, you got to follow the law, so I get that. Nonetheless, they're making this decision, and it's arbitrary. So if you increase the cost of labor, you're going to have to you're going to hire less people. That's the response, and historically that has happened. The lowest skilled people, labor force, is not going to have access to those jobs because they simply will not be created or offered because it will cost too much. And so they will shift to automation, and they will increase the price of said good or product, which comes back to us. It always falls back to us. So the road to Hades. But I believe the president and everybody knows this. If you've studied the minimum wage for a second, you get this information. Praying Durham's Nothing But Truth. Dr. Benjamin Carson next. State of the Union Address, AFR Talk.